to try to get to is it standard practice for a realtor to understand a preliminary title report? Is it standard practice? Should it be expected that the realtor in a transaction understands a title report to the extent that they would read an easement and know that there's an issue? Okay. Specifically, I'll give you an example that a friend of mine ran into. He sold the property to someone. They went to build their custom home and they found out that there is a height restriction that was granted 30 years earlier. And instead of building a two-story home, they could only build a one-story home, and they've already spent $25,000 on architect's fees and started with the permits. Okay, so the standard of practice, that's what you have to think about. Would I be expected to know this? And if the answer is yes, assume it is, then you've got to dig deeper, and that's why we're here. So thankfully, our partners, Lawyers Title, have helped us sponsor this event. And my favorite closing person is Shelly Williams. And she is at Lawyers Title, and she is in Lake Oswego. And I use her because she almost never makes a mistake. I think you did one time, just so you know, one time. Okay, so it's important. We've talked about building your board of directors, building people that you can trust in this industry. The trick about having a good closing escrow person that's reliable is when you get going fast and furious in your business and you're just trying to get through the day to make sure you get everything done, you need to be able to know that your title rep, your title person, your title officer is not making mistakes, just silly little mistakes, that they're accurate. And if you don't, you look bad to your clients. You might have to bring money into closing, which I've had to do in the past. All kinds of fun things happen. So for the way I work, you would choose someone you would partner with. For the way I work, I love Shelly. We don't go out to lunch a lot, do we? No. We don't go out drinking a lot, do we? No. Right. What I historically said is just do a really, really good job and I'm happy. I'll call you if we have a problem. Isn't that about it? Yeah. Okay. So, I'm really looking for her to be like an attorney, basically. So with that said, let's get into this. And the way we're going to do it is Austin will be my enlarger so you can read some of this because I knew that it'd be difficult to read it. And then Shelly and I will just tag team on important issues on these pages. So if you haven't done a transaction or if you have done a transaction, once you have a contract in place, it gets sent to the title company and escrow is open. And one of the key hurdles is the preliminary title report and when that comes out and what it says. How many have read a preliminary title report? Okay, good. So here's a sample. The way we did this was Shelly found a closing. We kind of whited out to protect the innocent. And then we just looked for issues that we found on other closings. So we've got multiple things pulled together here just so you know what you can run into if you don't take the time to read your title report. Right? Do you have anything to say yet?
Well, a lot of quite often I get the question from agents, what are the red flags on the preliminary title report, or are there any red flags? And so it's important to remember that we're a team and you might be looking for some red flags like building restrictions, height restrictions, and things like that. We're looking for red flags like liens or judgments or things that might affect whether or not we could actually assure the property. So we're a team. I'm looking for red flags, you're looking for red flags, and together we're going to make sure that our questions and issues are addressed. But this is where you look for things that might be of interest.
Yeah, exactly. And if you call your title rep and you say, what are the red flags? I'm telling you right now, you're going to be in trouble. You need to know what the red flags are. And the title rep is there to help you understand what they mean. If you rely on them to tell you what the red flags are, it'd be like relying on an attorney to tell you what you want for dinner. Not going to happen. you have to read through it and catch it and then say to Shelley, hey, tell me more about this issue. And we'll get into that a little bit later.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first page looks like this. It says preliminary title report. You can see the date that it's opened. Oh, thank you. You can see the date that it's open. That's probably too big. We don't need that on this page. Thank you. Can you go back to the other side? This page doesn't have a whole lot on it. Okay, there you go. It says who the title officer is. That's always good, especially if you have this come and you're not the listing agent. You didn't say where the escrow was going to go. You're working on a transaction where they pick the title company. You always want to find out who the title officer is that you're going to be working with. Personally, I like to see that it's somebody I've worked with. And if I don't see a name that I've worked with over the years, then I have to be extra careful. Spend extra time looking at closing statements to make sure they're correct. We have used a title officer in the last few years, and it seemed like every title closing we had some small mistake in it. Something was missed, an email that changed the credits or whatever. So, and here's how you reach them, right?
Yeah. So the escrow officer, so I'm your contact. I'm your, if you ever have a question on the report, behind me or with my team is my title officer, and you don't talk to him or them very often at all, but he is the person, or they are the people who gather the information that goes into the report. So they're my backup, they're my team, my title team, but I'm your contact on all the transactions.
Yeah, so that's a good distinction. You have the title company, and then you have the title officer who put together the report. Then you have your closing person that you rely on. And then she has a band of attorneys behind her that can answer questions and do legal work for you if you need it, right?
Yeah, keep in mind, our legal counsel is there to represent us, lawyer's title, and lawyer's title doesn't want to get sued either. So we are going to make sure we're addressing your questions as best we can. And so that we know what it's called.
Right. All right, as we dig into it, we have Schedule A. Go ahead, Jill.
Okay, so this is where we disclose, from the beginning of the transaction, we disclose where it says Alta Standard Owner's Policy. That would be the sales price. And the charge is for the title insurance policy that will be issued after we close. That's a seller charge, and we can get into all of that, and you'll be looking at closing statements. But this is where we disclose the sales price, or what we think it's going to be. And then underneath that, Alta Extended Lender's Policy is based on what we think the loan amount will be. So these are just upfront disclosures as far as what our fees will be. It's not all the fees, but it's the title insurance.
Okay, so
yeah.
Would you please tell me why it says Alta is 284 or 6, 286, and there's an endorsement that says another $100.
Okay.
What does that mean?
All right. So in Oregon, the purchase contract says that the seller will provide and pay for the owner's policy. That's the first line item there. Then the buyer has to pay for a policy at the same time for their lender, because their lender won't close a loan without their own title policy. So we base that premium on their loan amount. Every lender requires endorsements, and that's the 100, 116, and 8.1. And those things have been established, the endorsements that they require have been established for many, 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 many years. So they don't want just a copy of the owner's policy. They want additional endorsements. That's what those are.
Which protects them.
Yeah, it protects them. And we don't really need to know what they are, except they have to do with CC&Rs and address and stuff. But every lender will ask for that because they want a little more coverage than the owner's policy gives. So that's why you see that separated out.
And I have had transactions where my sellers have dug in and said, well, I'm not going to pay for those special, for my buyers, I'm not going to pay for those special endorsements, right? Or sellers, whatever. You'll see this on both sides. And I'm just going to pay the standard fee. I'm not going to pay for all those endorsements. So this is why you need to know this, because you'll probably have one someday where somebody will dig in and say, or an attorney will call you because you're handling an estate or an REO or something, and they'll call you and say, hey, we're not paying for that. And then the other side says, well, we're not paying for that. And then you have to decide who's going to pay for it. Right? you'll get into those spots multiple times in a transaction if you're not careful. Okay, and then how about, let's go down.
Okay, so then it discloses here who the vested owners are. So I've got Samuel and Sally Seller. This is important to look at because let's say you've got a purchase contract and Sam has signed it because he's your seller. That's what he says. But then you get the title report and Sally's there. Well, why didn't Sally sign my contract? Oh, we forgot to tell you.
My sale agreement, my earnest money
Sorry.
agreement is the
Yeah,
contract
earnest
she's
money
talking
agreement.
about.
Why didn't Sally sign? Well, that's a good question. Is Sally still around? Are they divorced? Is Sally, passed away? We need to know. And so we're going to be looking at that and comparing it to the purchase contract. And you'll want to look at your title report too and make sure everybody that has signed your earnest money agreement is a vested owner. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So this is like really, really critical. One of the first things you look at when you look at a title report. Who in the world owns this property? Who's it deeded to? And with our environment today, where you have a lot of divorces, a husband and wife might buy it, and this is the way it was vested, and then they get divorced, and then he remarries.
Yes.
And he has signed it, and we have her name on it. And we have to get her to sign it. And she now lives in Florida.
Yeah.
And she hates him because he was a horrible guy and never paid child support and alimony. And so now he says, well, how much are you going to pay me?
Yeah.
Right?
These are the things we get to deal with from the customer side. It's the truth. Yeah, and also there's lots and lots of variables of things. For instance, like an estate. You might have an individual who owns a property, they pass away, and the son comes and says, I have a right to sell the property. I know I do, da, 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 da. So how do you know? Well, if there's a probate, that's when you want to get us involved and say, this guy says he's an executor or whatever the word might be of the estate. Can you check into it? Well, they might be, or the property might be owned in a trust, which the guy would not then be an executor, it'd be another title. But still you want to know if the person that I'm working with really have a right to sign documents to sell the property. So that part's important.
And what if it says LLC?
Okay, so
An LLC can own a piece of property, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of people establish LLCs for a lot of reasons. So if we see that the property is owned by an LLC, we are going to ask for and require backup documents. We're going to want to see the articles of organization and the operating agreement for the LLC. And every LLC has them. I shouldn't say every, almost every. We are going to want to see those, and we're going to want to make sure that we can confirm who the authorized signer is. Or when we get to preparing closing documents and deeds, we want to make sure the right person is signing it who has the authority to sell the property.
Yeah. So this could be husbands and wives, it could be LLCs, it could be corporations, it could be all kinds of fun things. It could be a combination of both. So I've seen them where it's an LLC with an individual. I've seen it where it's been multiple LLCs. So what happens if you don't catch this up front and you go to closing and then all of a sudden the title officer says, oh, shoot, we're closing already. By the way, can you give me copies of all the documentation for these? And they're all on vacation, hiking in the Himalayas.
That's a very good point, because when we open escrow, everything we do, we want to be ready and prepared from a title insurance standpoint for that closing date. The date that's listed in the earnest money agreement. So if that date is going to be moved up substantially, we have to know, because then our gears start turning and you're going to want to make sure there's nothing on that title report that's going to prevent us from closing sooner. So that's important.
Yeah, and if you hear in your transaction, someone says to you, hey, they would love to close for cash sooner.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't know that this stuff hasn't been taken care of, you can't close for cash sooner. And we're paid when it closes, so we're normally highly motivated to not have obstacles at the last minute. Right, so that's good to know, the vesting.
Yeah.
How about this? This is the
Legal description.
legal description, right?
The reason this is important to look at, especially if you're dealing with things like rural property, where you have a big parcel of land, but then you've got a little tiny easement over here. You need that easement to access the property. You want to make sure we are including in our report everything that goes with it, all the property that is being sold. There might be a little parcel that's a driveway, something. And usually we will catch that because it would be part of a prior legal description. But it's just best to check our legal to make sure it matches. If you have two tax account numbers, you know you have two tax account numbers for a particular piece of property, put both tax account numbers on the earnest money agreement, on the purchase contract. So you identify the property that way and by the address. So you're gonna wanna look at the legal. The other thing is if you've got a condo and the condo has a parking space and or a storage space, sometimes those things are deeded. They show on the deed, and sometimes they're included in the CCNRs. So you're going to want to know the difference. You want to know, should the parking place and the storage unit be in the legal description, or are they identified in the CCNRs?
Yeah, and there's a lot of potential hangups here because we've had properties where the owners have said, oh, well, I own that little corner of the property of my neighbor's property, and that's how I get on mine. And when we turn it in, we're selling the tax lot the owner is on. And there's no reference. They have no idea that the owner comes across the neighbor's property. So we have to figure out, well, what's the interest that they have in getting across the owner's property? Is it a handshake? Do they actually own a strip? Do they own a piece? And that's where it's so important, especially when you get into these rural things, that you dig extra deep to find out what other considerations are. I have one where I sold a property and there was a marina for this neighborhood. And when it was platted originally, each lot was assigned a boat slip. And I had a sale agreement on the boat slip, on the property, and come to find out that 5 years earlier, the neighbor and somebody else had switched because they both agreed. And the buyer was thinking they were getting the boat slip that this person's boat was in. And in reality, if it closed, they had to go back to another one that was near the shoreline that had nowhere near the depth. And so these are the reasons why you have to dig deep on these so you don't get hung up at the last minute. All right, Schedule B.
Yeah, Schedule B, we don't really need to get into standard exceptions. It's kind of boring.
Yeah, this part of here, that exists in all the title companies, all the reports, so we won't deal with that. Let's get down to special
exceptions. And this is where you're going to see all of the recorded documents or anything monetary that affects this property. So at this point in time, the prior year's taxes had been paid in full, but we were looking for an upcoming tax bill.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's just information. We're showing what the prior taxes were. We have an easement for utilities, and this particular easement is shown on the recorded plat. So we could give you a copy of that to see where that utilities easement is.
You have to read these.
Yeah.
Right, so you have to read these. Normally you can disregard the top, but when you see these special exceptions, you need to verify, okay, is that the tax amount that people think they have on this property?
Yep.
Because there may have been an extra tax lot and this would trigger it. The owner had two tax lots and no one ever told you until this came out and you said, wait, that can't be right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then easements. So here's where we get into some more of the fun stuff that trips you up. Easements, utility easements, they exist on practically every property you'll sell. They won't be able to have utilities to the property. So the utility companies will not bring their utilities to a house unless they get an easement that protects their ability to come in and repair the utilities. And so pretty much you're going to see this on every house. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on that. Usually they're on the sides or they follow the roadway up. And
the easements run with the property. So you can't erase them, you can't change them unless you address whoever benefits from or is encumbered by the easement. So easements run with the property. Restricted covenants regarding underground utilities, kind of the same thing. There is a recorded document that addresses that. You can look at the recorded document, you can read it, make sure you understand what it's talking about, because we don't read all these documents. And then you've got road maintenance agreement that you're going to want to look at. You know, who uses the road, who pays for it, how is it addressed?
I think we have one in here.
We do.
Yeah, so road maintenance agreements would be, you sell a house that's like a flag lot. Or you sell a country property and at the end of the street, there's like 5 mailboxes. You have to figure out who maintains that road. The lenders will usually ask, but historically I've had many where they didn't think about it. And so you have to figure out who's going to maintain that road. Because you might have an owner say, we all chip in. And every couple of years we have a grader that comes up and they drop some gravel. It costs us about $500. And then when you order it, it says that your property owner is responsible for the road. You say, okay, well, they had a nice agreement with their friends, but at the end of the day, this owner is going to be responsible to maintain the road. They should know that. Especially if people decide they don't want to pay. You get a disgruntled neighbor and he says, well, I'm not going to pay this year because so-and-so on the other side of the street's obnoxious. And I'm going to punish them. We're going to leave that big pothole right in front of their house. Okay.
Okay, so then exception number 11, this just is disclosing that the seller has a mortgage loan on the property, the trustee. As of, the trustee was recorded in 2002. This is the amount of the original mortgage. So that's not the payoff balance. So it's going to be our job, and it is our job, to contact whoever that lender is, whoever it is they make their payments to, obtain a payoff demand, and it will tell us, well, they've paid this down to, and it's only now 90,000. So that's what you see on the closing statement. So sometimes we get calls, let's say the sales price of this property was 150. And you see this report that says, but wait, they owe 148.9. How can that be? So that is not what they owe. That's the original balance of the mortgage. Also, what you want to look for is your seller may say, I want a net sheet of what my proceeds are going to be. I only have one loan on the property. And then you do your net sheet, and then you get the title report, and oh gosh, there's a second, and it's a line of credit, a second mortgage or a second trustee. The seller forgot. Yeah, or they don't realize that it encumbers their property. Maybe they thought it was just a, non-collateralized. So that's going to affect, if they owe anything on that line of credit, it's going to affect their proceeds. So something to look for.
Yeah, so if you were looking at this, it'd be nice to know who took out the loan, right? So that's nice to know, because you can have problems with having somebody that signed on a loan and the lender says, well, we want that person to acknowledge that it's being paid off, and now they're gone. And again, we always look at this. This is not a big deal when prices are going up as fast as they're going up. But in the Great Recession, that was the first number we looked at. We'd get a prelim and open it up to make sure what they owed. Because prices had dropped so fast, a lot of my clients owed more than the houses were worth. And they would not give me the right number because they didn't know the right number, or they were afraid to say the right number. And so we would order prelims. Sometimes right when we listed the houses, we would get these recordings and say, okay, let's just confirm how much they owe on this house before we start spending our money. Because if they owe too much and they're not going to come out with any money, sellers, I could tell you in my career, there's been dozens and dozens of real estate people that I know, and I've been hung up on this myself, where the sellers did not tell them that they were upside down in their house. And somehow they thought it was going to get worked out at the end. And then when this comes out, you realize they have no equity. In fact, you're not going to get paid. Okay?
Not a good day.
Not a good day. Let's go to 12.
Then when you open escrow, you have your signed agreement, earnest money agreement. We do our title search, and we search the property, and we search the names, the seller's names and the buyer's names. We look for recording information, court records, bankruptcy. We search all of that. If we find anything, that could affect the ability to sell or convey title, you disclose it. So in this case, we found a judgment against our seller. It's a, like a credit card that had gone to collections and eventually ended up as a judgment. So we disclose it. Most often, so that means that has to go away in order for the seller to convey clear title to the property. That has to be dealt with. We either pay it off or we obtain a statement from Discover Bank that says they don't owe us any money. It has to be in writing and it has to be addressed to us. So this takes work on our part. And this could be something that if you've got a cash transaction, your buyer's paying cash and you want to close in 3 days, maybe not from a title insurance standpoint. We will not close unless we have evidence, written evidence that that has gone away.
And have you ever had this be an IRS judgment and then you
Yes.
couldn't reach the IRS?
Oh, yes, yes. That during COVID, that was a big problem.
Yeah, so they were shut down, right?
Yeah.
Couldn't reach anybody.
Yeah.
And what happened was they just owed some back taxes and maybe they negotiated something with the IRS or the state, whatever, and they're making payments and it shows up as a judgment because they're going to collect their money. And now you can't get a hold of them. So you can't close till they respond. So the entire transaction is in the hands of the IRS, which is never a good thing.
Would you ask your client if they knew about these during, like when you start talking to them instead of waiting to the end?
We used to. In the Great Recession, I got burned on this like once and I thought, time to start asking every single client what they owe. And are they the owners of the house? Is anyone else signed on the house? Yeah, exactly. Because I got into one and then I was totally surprised and then they apologized. They didn't realize they should have told me. And I'd already ordered photography and all kinds of things before I figured it out. And there's no way we were going to sell it. They had to go to a short sale and that took forever. So ended up going to foreclosure.
In section 11, is that where refinances would show up too?
Yeah.
So that would get listed down there.
Any loans that are on it, they're going to show up there. Yeah.
So when people refinance, let's say they bought their house in 2002 and they got a mortgage loan, and then in 2010 they refinanced. So you won't see the prior loan on the title report. You'll just see those that are existing.
Yeah. So to your point, I've had these where I've had a first and a second and then a private third. So they owed a first and a second, which were recorded, and then they went to brother, mom or dad, grandma, grandpa, friend, borrowed more, and that person also recorded a lien against the property, and you had three of those. And so it's pretty nice to know right up front where you stand. Because let's say the third party that you have to get a payoff from, you can't reach. What do you do?
If we can't reach a beneficiary of a trustee,
Yeah.
can't close.
There you go. You will not get paid.
Yeah.
And you can do everything, go through the home inspections, the whole thing, and you wait till you find out at the last minute, hey, we've been trying for weeks. We cannot find this person.
How early can we get to these? How early can we order?
When you turn your transaction in, they get sent. Who sends ours in? Do you?
Huh.
Do you send ours in to Shelly?
Sorry.
Oh, thanks for paying attention.
Sorry. I'm working.
The sale agreement.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I thought.
You have an agreement in place, it's not something you can order before, when you just have a listing.
We do those for life. We're not especially interested in doing listing prelims for everybody because that's what our title plan's paid to do for transactions that are going to close. So it's not our favorite thing to do, and I don't like to ask my title department to do listing prelims, just we do them for them.
Well, is it fair to say that we close almost everything we
Yeah,
work on?
yeah, which is why we do a brief, but.
Right. It's also fair to say that I don't divide my business up a third to three of my favorite people. Right. It creates more work well, now I can't even remember, and Marcella, creates more work for her. So there are some automatic benefits that you get if you send a lot of your business to one person. They'll answer the phone. That's always helpful.
Yeah.
So, and she usually answers her phone. So it's always good.
So it's really important. We would much rather deal with you all calling us and say, I'm looking at this prelim, I don't understand this. This looks bad to me. We would like that way more than us thinking we're looking at a normal prelim and it's not what you were expecting. So do look at them and do say, and we want you to call. We want you to say, will you walk me through this? What did this mean? What did, you know? And well, that's way preferable.
So if you have a relationship with someone and, you know, there's a commitment and they know you're going to get their business and you start communicating with them and you build a relationship, when you call and say, hey, can you send me a copy of the last recorded deed on that property? I don't get this. Well, you know, might cost you some money, which I've had happen. If you ask and say, will you do a lien search?
Yeah.
Don't do a prelim, just look for liens. Okay, it's a lot less work.
Yeah.
And that's really what we've done when we've listed houses that I'm getting suspicious about. Like I kind of feel like, I'm not sure I'm getting the right story here or the full story. So we'll order a lien search. We're thinking that way like a month or two ago. I can't remember who it was.
A week ago.
A week ago, there you go. So we wanted to do that because I thought, this doesn't feel that great. Not a lot of communication.
So here's,
Can you also call the city and kind of see if there's liens on the property?
I wouldn't necessarily call the city because there can be liens on the property, but if they're not recorded, they're screwed. That's the way the law works. So you have to record them. Otherwise, they may or may not get paid out of closing. So if I loaned you money and I never recorded a lien against your home, you could sell your home and never tell me. But if I record a lien against your home, it's not going to get sold unless you talk to me and or pay me, right?
yeah.
Okay.
The other thing, I guess we were gonna talk about child support in a minute.
Oh, yeah, we have one. Yeah. Okay. All right. So can we go up to the top again?
So the rest of this, the report, the rest of the prelim is really just kind of disclosure. Here's what we do look for, here's what we don't look for. It gives you an example of recording costs.
Yeah.
We don't do survey.
Things they don't do. This is what they don't do.
Yeah.
Right? And it includes things like they don't survey the property to make sure the fence is in the right place.
Yeah.
They don't go out and check to see who's actually in the home and are they the actual owners.
And satisfactory evidence or indemnity that there's no statutory liens. Because of the way the construction lien law is written in Oregon, anybody who's worked on a property, I think I'm gonna get this right, has the right to lien it within 75 days.
Right.
So if you've got a.
From
new
the
roof-
last day they did work
Yeah, from the last
or
day.
had supplies to look with.
Mhm. You got a new roof on and it was 25 grand and the seller says, I don't like the work you did, I'm not gonna pay you. That's the problem.
Yeah.
With that. So we wanna know, has anybody done any, and we will ask.
So understanding the lien law is a good thing. I have had these where the party that did work claimed that they should be paid because they went and sent someone to pick up a tool on such and such a date, even though the work was done 2 months before. And so the law specified the last time the person was at the property doing something. And so that put them within the 75 days. That's a whole different class. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because lien law, we'll get somebody in here to talk about it. But did I go by, hang on. Did I go by too fast? Did I miss a page? I'm going back. 8,
Easement.
we got easements. Ooh, okay. Okay, end of exceptions.
Yeah.
So let's start looking. So we found the judgment, we went through the judgment. There's a judgment in circuit court.
So we put a notation in here that we also searched the buyer's name and we didn't find any judgments against the buyer. So that's a good thing.
You always do that.
We always do, always check for any judgments against the buyer. Here's what people get upset about. Let's say a buyer has an ongoing child support obligation. They're not behind. it's ongoing per their decree. That is a judgment that could affect the title of the, or the ownership of the property. So a buyer sees their child support obligation disclosed on this title report, that it's none of anybody's business whether I have child support or not. So,
And they won't tell you.
yeah, no, they don't think they need to. So we have to explain, here's why we disclose that, because if we give you, we transfer ownership to you, Mr. Buyer, and you're behind on your child support obligation, those arrearages can become a lien on the property that would take precedence over your mortgage lender. Your mortgage lender is not gonna like that, it won't allow it. So we're gonna check with either the state or your ex-spouse, whoever you make your payments to, and we're gonna have evidence that they're current. So that's why we should.
This is another good thing to look at always, because I have had transactions where a man was marrying a new woman. He was divorced and he had alimony payments and never told his new wife. And it never showed up until they went to buy their home together. And suddenly he didn't fill it out on his financial statement to the bank. And it was triggered by the preliminary title report that came out. The lender looked at it and said, wait, he's got an alimony payment to his ex-wife. Suddenly he doesn't qualify for the loan. He never told us. And we're a month into the transaction. So, people do, you have to assume you're going to have these problems.
So does it matter if the current? Does it matter if it's thick?
It matters, well, it's both. Yeah, right.
So.
If they're not current, then what are you going to do?
Well, first of all, if they're not current, if they're making their payments to the state would file something that says there are these arrearages. But in any case, we're going to reach out to the state and get a statement that says they are current, or we're going to reach out to the ex-spouse and get something in writing that says they are current. So it won't necessarily be disclosed here.
If they are current, so would it get way?
Well, as long as in their application for a new loan, it's disclosed and they can qualify based on that additional payment. The one I had where that person didn't want to tell anybody, we had fireworks like you can't believe. And the only way they were going to get the home is if his new wife brought in some of her money to put down to increase the down payment. She wasn't very happy about that. A lot of promises were made that didn't work out. So, and it's fun to be the realtor on the side listening to all this, hoping that they're going to get it figured out. Okay, so we are leaving that report and I am plugging in a page from another report that Shelly found for me. And so let's see. This is a property in Villebois. It's a Villebois Homeowners Association that has the CC&Rs. There's an ownership and maintenance agreement. There's a deed of trust. The bottom was the key. I think I started. There you go. A judgment for installment payments for child support. Alimony, child support. They lost a lawsuit and the winner got a judgment against them. All kinds of fun things can show up against you. And the idea of the title report is that they catch it so the lenders know, so the parties know. And they usually don't tell you, just so you know. So in this case, these are installment payments. You think that amount of an installment payment could ruin your ability to qualify? Yeah.
So this is not we're not saying when we disclose these things, we're not saying that someone's delinquent or that they're, it's a bad thing. It's just something that could affect the priority of the title work. The lender does not want to see that on there.
Yeah, you don't want to have judgment around this. You just want to make sure the transaction closes. So the one I'm pointing out to you is one that I've had. I haven't had many, but I've had plenty where they thought they were done making payments.
Yeah.
And then we have a big judgment. In fact, I think we've had one in the last year where somebody had to catch up some payments or something.
I guess something important to know here is it's not going to be your job to contact the ex-spouse or contact whoever it is, they make their payments, so that's our job. So if we see that disclosed, and we're used to it, so.
So if it's determined, yeah, they are behind, or they do have some judgment that they owe money, is that settled at closing then, or?
It can be. usually.
She can collect it to ensure that it happens.
And then it can go through.
And then I pay the person that is due the money, and we get instructions from them that match up so that we know that we're following, that we're paying the right amount.
I've had these where they had a judgment, and it could be the buyer or the seller, but let's say it's the seller, had a judgment, had no idea it was going to impair his ability to sell his house. The judgment shows up and it's so big, there's not enough money to close the house. So we had one, did you close Sohail's? We had one and he had a $13.4 million note secured against the house that showed up on the prelim. And we sold the house for 1.9.
That'll be happening.
Yeah. So what happened was he borrowed 13 million for his business and basically pledged everything he owned. And so the bank put a little note on this house, said, hey, you can't sell your house without sending us some money. So
Yeah.
you get those. If you're in the business long enough, you do enough deals, these will start to show up, which is why we're doing this class. All right. And you sent me this over. You want to start on it?
This is just a recorded plat. It's a really old plat, Clackamas County, but this is where the utility easement is disclosed. And it's in the little tiny fine print. So if you remember on the prelim, it said utility easement as disclosed on recorded plat. This is a recorded plat. The utility easement is addressed up here. And it typically says something like all lots are subject to 10-foot utility easement on the easterly boundary or something like that.
So it might look like something like this if
Yeah.
you're looking at a flat. That's a road, but I mean, you see dotted lines normally.
Yes. So sometimes you see utility easements like this on a recorded plat. Sometimes it's just a separate recorded document. But-
Yeah, and that is the trick because you do have these where they show up on a plat. Like we've had to figure out where the easement, where the evidence of the easement is. It doesn't show up anywhere. You can't read it. But they found it in the prelim, but there's no document that you can read. It's in this document, the plat.
It's on the map.
It's on the map. It's not in any, Word document that you can pull a copy of, which we have some examples here. So we've had many, many cases where they're in the plat and you got to find them in the plat. All right.
I think this is a copy of the, what's at the top here?
Oh, and let's see, we are currently accepting, okay, so this is an HOA that's doing work and they're now getting ready to assess the houses, $50 per household to pay for repairs on a road.
It's road maintenance.
And they recorded a document to make sure everybody pays their fair share, even though they hadn't finalized the amount because they were getting bids to do the work. And, I'm sure they saw some for sale signs in the neighborhood and somebody said, you better modify this and get it recorded so everybody pays their fair share.
Yeah.
So here's one where you can find it right up there. The devil's in the details.
Yeah.
And this one is,
That's just the documentation for, I think, the restricted covenant.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
So if you haven't read these, this one says, no outdoor overhead wire or service drop fee for the distribution of electric energy, et cetera, et cetera. So when you get copies of easements, so the point on this is when you read that prelim and it says an easement for something, you don't know what it is, or you want clarity, you call your title officer and say, give me a copy of that easement. This is a copy of an easement and they're talking about the restrictions. So the party that I know that ran into the height restriction, it was in the CC&Rs from like 1945. And nobody read them because they're from 1945 and they didn't think they would apply anymore. And the 80-year-old woman next door said, yeah, I've been here for 60 years. And guess what? It does apply. And you have to go back and start over. So this is why these easements are important and you have to figure out what's involved. half the time, you don't even know where they apply on a plat, because sometimes it's really difficult to read the meets and bounds.
Yeah.
Does anyone know what that means? What I just said? It's really difficult to find an easement, is what I meant.
Yeah.
So you can read the easement. So the prelim says easement, you can order the easement, you can read it, and you don't even know where it is on the map. Does this even apply to my lot? Is it somewhere in the neighborhood?
Yeah.
So how many times do we call and ask the title company to actually locate the easement on the map so we know where the heck it is? Yeah, because the easements are usually described by meets and bounds, you know, the northeast corner, the northwest quadrant of the whatever,
89
go.
degrees.
Yeah, go 150 feet, and then you gotta, you know, figure out where that is. You can call the title company and say, hey, shade that easement in so we know where it is. Because no one else will be able to read it if we can't read it.
That's for the real title geeks right there.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
just a copy of a trust deed. That is the monetary encumbrance for the loan, the mortgage loan on the property. And in Oregon, it's called deed of trust. We don't record mortgages here. We record deed of trust. In other parts of the country, they do mortgages. The difference is just about foreclosure and the rights of the lender and the rights of the borrower. But here we do deed of trust, and it's a standard form. This is a standard loan.
Yep, so almost everything you're gonna do has a deed of trust, and if you said, hey, would you send me a copy of the deed of trust? Because as you can see in the earlier section, it just said deed of trust recorded such and such. And if you said, for some reason, send me a copy of it, I wanna read it, this is what it looks like. Shows addresses, where they are, who they are,
Lender.
lenders. Now, why would even that be important? Well, I've had to negotiate for some of my sellers before to get the lenders to lower their price that they were going to get paid. So I've been called in on houses where the people haven't made a payment for 6 months. They're receiving notices, and I'm trying to figure out what phone number I'm going to call to tell them that there's not enough equity or whatever. I have a conversation I have to have with them. And so sometimes we have to figure this stuff out with the help of our title officer. Or escrow person, I mean. Okay, what is that one? Sorry, I got scanned in and cut the top off. Oh, okay, so she also sent over a copy of, in the note and trust deed, it was a variable loan, variable rate loan, an adjustable rate mortgage. Anyone heard of adjustable rate mortgages yet? Okay, so if you look at the note up above, you can see that there's a box check that says adjustable rate rider. So the rider is going to tell you the terms of the adjustable rate note that they have. We say mortgage, but it's not mortgage.
Right.
So they still say mortgage insurance, but it's really,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, so if we look, it says, okay, there's an adjustable rate rider. And sometimes your clients will say, I don't have any paperwork. I lost it all. And I have no idea how to figure out what's happening to my loan. And you might be able to do it through the title company. So here's what it looks like, I think.
So there's different forms of trust deeds also. So institutional lender will file something like this. But let's say if Bob and Sue borrow money from grandma and to buy a house, and grandma wants to have her secured, she wants her interest secured by a recorded trust deed. So in other words, Bob and Sue own the property, but grandma's got a lien interest on it. So that would, if it's recorded, that would also show as a trust deed, just like an institutional lender. So we would contact grandma and we say, grandma, how much do they owe you? And she'd tell us, and we collect it and we pay her. And then, so it's no different than having an institutional lender like Wells Fargo or something.
Yep. So as I was reading through that, the chart, I circled the charges and the liens. This is where they explain everything. And somewhere in here, keep going, because I circled the key things. Yeah, there you go. Charges and liens, keep on. Next page. Protection of lender's interest. just so you know, your clients will always have some clause where they commit to making sure that the property is protected. So if you haven't dug into trust deeds at all, they have to maintain the security for the bank. So if you go out to a house and it's really run down, or they took the left wing of the house off and never told the lender, they're in violation of their underlying note. They're supposed to maintain the whole thing and keep it in good condition. And people tend to do things like, hey, I think I'll take the left side off and make it go out 5 more feet. And then they don't have the money to do it.
It's pretty specific too.
Yeah, they're very specific. So these are just pages in a trust deed. Okay, evidence of insurance. Trust deeds say that your client has to have insurance. They have to keep the property insured at all times. So if you have one of those and they can't tell you who the insurance is with, they're in violation of their note. All right, onward. So that rider for the adjustable rate, it looks like this. Here's what it looks like. It talks about what the base rate is. It talks about what the, where is it?
The index and how often and by
Oh.
how much the rate can change.
Yeah, where's the word index? Oh, there it is. There's the current index. So their current index, and then what the percentage is that they can add to the index. And it also talks about what the maximum, this is like what most people want to know, what the maximum interest rate is on that adjustable rate mortgage. So when you get an adjustable rate mortgage, I've been around long enough. When the first ones came out, they never had a maximum rate. And so people would get an adjustable rate mortgage with a teaser rate that was really low. And then the lenders would raise it to 12 and 13 and 14 and 15. And so they came down on all that and said, nope, you have to disclose it and you have to have a maximum rate that you can go at. Well, if you bought the home and you're at 4 3/4 and you have a maximum rate that you could be as 10 3/4 in the environment we're in right now, they could be at 10 3/4 in 3 to 5 years. And then they're priced out of the house, but they never thought it would happen or they didn't understand it. So those are adjustable rate mortgage concerns that you might have. And that's the additional pages. Is that it?
Yeah. I think.
All right. That's it. What time is it?
2:07.
Perfect. Any questions? Is that a good sign?
Yeah, like I said, anytime you get a title report, you do a question or something that makes sense.
Yeah, and remember, as a part of doing business, find your title person that you like to work with, your escrow person. Find your lender that you like to work with, that takes care of you, that does business the way you like, that communicates the way you like, right? You have to find the people that you want to work with, and that's who you go with, and you'll do more business if you have really good people. Yes.
One, your example was like the first builder that wanted to do the 2-story building. If somebody bought like a place that they wanted to add a second story to, but they didn't tell you that that was in their plan or anything like that, they go through all this and you find out that they're not allowed to, there's no recourse on the real estate agent.
Well,
If you can tell them that add a second story.
yeah, no, it's not that simple, because what happens is if there's a suit in a real estate transaction, the realtors always get named. So when you sue, the idea is you cast the largest net possible as a lawyer and name everyone that's touched a transaction, because it's too expensive to go all the way down to the finish line and then find out somebody that you didn't name had something to do with the problem. So what they do is they sue all the realtors, that's like everybody. And so the answer is, whether you think you're guilty or not, you'll get deposed, and here it kicks in, and
We had a conversation where like you would let them know this is as high as it can ever be on the building that you're buying right now.
well, you're not responsible for what they take out in their mortgage, right? So, I mean, I don't think the realtors are responsible for what the maximum rate is on the note that the borrowers get. I don't think that. If you're counseling them about buying something, and here's why you need to, and you're going to get priced out of your house and you misquote, that's where you'd have some liability, but it's the lender that has the liability for saying, don't worry about it. It's all going to be good. And then, they lose their house. And it's happened. Just think longer term, right? That's our challenge as realtors. We think it from transaction to transaction. You have to think over a 10 or 20-year career. I need to learn these right now because I don't want one of these to happen. You lose a lot of sleep when you get a letter from an attorney. Whether you think you did anything wrong or not, they're going to accuse you of it because they want our E&O to pay for the solution.
They go after the deep pockets.
That's right. Yeah, and if they don't think your client has any money, then they hammer the realtor, right? Because they know we have insurance. And so, I've had somebody that threatened to sue and they said it's because I told them something about a property in the back of the house. It's like 6 months later, got a letter from an attorney threatening to sue. I had to prove I wasn't even there. I was in Palm Desert with my family. But they could swear that it was me that told them this information, that it was an open space behind this house. And it turned out it was actually a buildable lot. And after they were in the house for 4 months, equipment showed up to start taking the trees down. And I got a big letter from an attorney saying that I had misrepresented what the property was behind. They gave the date and the time and the whole darn thing. I literally had to prove I was out, it wasn't even in town. It was their own realtor is what it turned out to be, but they didn't want to blame their own realtor. It was probably their sister or something, I don't remember exactly. So anyway, this stuff happens, right? You can't take anything for granted. People behave unpredictably. And this is just more of how you become a professional. You read these title reports. When you don't understand, you call your title person, I call her title person, but she's my escrow person. You call them, say, hey, help me with this. I don't understand it. What does this mean?
More and more these days, I find myself, having a conversation like this, and I would say, in this particular circumstances, I cannot and won't give legal advice. So if I were you, I would spend the $300 or $500 or whatever it is and get advice from an attorney, just to get the right answer. That's what I think you should do. So, and I say that more often now than I ever have.
I believe it.
Yeah, we can't give legal advice, and I'm not a real estate agent, so I'm gonna listen. And then I'm probably gonna say, here's who I think you should get more advice from.
Yeah.
Just so you're protected.
Any other questions? Have I sufficiently scared you a little bit about this? That was the goal. That was the goal. Now that you're a realtor, guess what? You gotta work harder than you thought.
I have Shelly and Cindy left business cards just on that table next to Chris. So if you want to grab those on your way out, you can.
Thank you so
You can
much for
contact.
having me.